The life and music of Russian composer Galina Ustvolskaya remains the subject of fascination and controversy. Her wildly creative, austere, and often percussive style, coupled with her reputation as a recluse, earned her nicknames like the Lady with a Hammer or the High Priestess of Sado-Minimalism. Throughout the world, critics have struggled to find descriptors for her music, calling it atomic, cosmic, nihilistic, or an expression of the subconscious. Viktor Suslin, her editor at Sikorsky Verlag, described her music as coming from the black hole of Leningrad, epicenter of communist terror, a city that suffered so terribly the horrors of war. By her own account, she was disinterested in history, politics, or society, and used the same metaphor, music from the black hole, to describe her music as unprecedented and beyond earthly influence. Ustvolskaya was born in 1919 in Petrograd, just 2 years after the October Revolution. Her life spans almost the entirety of the violent and politically tumultuous century in that city, reflected in its name change to Leningrad in 1924 and St. Petersburg in 1991. She would remain there until her death in 2006. Galina began her compositional studies at 18 with Arseny Gladkovsky at the musical college N.A. Rimsky-Korsakov and entered the Leningrad Conservatory in 1939. Her studies were interrupted by the siege of Leningrad, which claimed the lives of 800,000 civilians. She and the rest of the conservatory were evacuated to Tashkent, now part of Uzbekistan, in a relocation program that swept more than 16 million Russians out of harm's way. In 1943, she went to work in a military hospital in Tikhvin, a small city in the Leningrad region, despite the fact that Leningrad was still under siege. None of her musical works from this period survive. When Galina resumed her post-war studies at the conservatory, her primary composition teachers were Maximilian Steinberg from 1944 to 1946 and Dmitri Shostakovich from 1947 to 1948. Shostakovich's influence can be heard in her first piece, the Concerto for Piano, Full String Orchestra, and Timpani of 1946, an intense and powerful composition written as her diploma work. Shostakovich esteemed her music, quoting her 1949 trio in his Fifth Quartet and in his Michelangelo Suite. Throughout her career, Ustvolskaya fought to break free of the shadow of Shostakovich. According to her editor, Viktor Suslin, Shostakovich even proposed marriage, but she broke with him in the early 1960s. In 1994, she gave her final word on the subject. One thing remains clear. It would seem that such an outstanding figure as Shostakovich was not outstanding to me. On the contrary, it was painful and killed my best feelings. After completing her studies, Ustvolskaya was invited to teach at the musical college N.A. Rimsky-Korsakov in Leningrad, where she taught from 1947 until her retirement in 1977. The students loved her and said that she developed their inner hearing, taught independent, non-standard thinking, and emphasized the search for meaning and essence in music. One of her favorite phrases was, "Write shorter and more talented works." In February 1948, Ustvolskaya, like many others, was obliged to undergo a profound reorientation and began to write music for the people. Within a year, she had written Dream of Stepan Razin, music depicting the legendary Russian folk hero that received high praise, was performed on the 2 opening concerts of the 1949 season of the Leningrad Philharmonic, and was nominated for a Stalin Prize. All of Ustvolskaya's subsequent concert pieces written under Stalin were criticized and received only single performances. During the 50s, she also wrote music for films, one of which was The Girl and the Crocodile. At the same time, Ustvolskaya kept on writing her highly personal works for the desk drawer. Some of these essential compositions received performances in the 1960s, but others were only performed many years later, when Soviet authorities became less concerned about policing artistic pursuits. These were inventive and challenging works that explored repetitions, extreme registers, chord clusters, and metric ambiguity. Take, for example, the Fourth Piano Sonata of 1957, which clearly encapsulates her personal style. Each note or pair of notes has its own weight. Dissonant intervals and chord clusters repeat at extremes in volume. Quadruple forte, or extremely loud, is sometimes followed shortly by quadruple piano, or extremely soft. Ustvolskaya's piano concerto was premiered in 1964 by pianist Pavel Serebryakov, rector at the Leningrad Conservatory, who performed this piece many times during the 1960s. Although many of her other works were unsuitable for the concert halls of that time and were sometimes misunderstood by the performers, she was neither a dissident nor the regime's victim. She believed in her star and just continued writing the required works in the socialist realist style until 1962, when she was able to break free from all links with conformism and focus only on her spiritual, non-religious creativity. In the 1970s, Ustvolskaya's highly original works were warmly received by a small, devoted group of listeners in Leningrad and Moscow. By this time, the critics of her music from the 1950s and 60s had completely disappeared. While never an adherent to a particular religion, it was in the 1970s that Ustvolskaya composed a series of works with Latin liturgical subtitles that she simply called compositions. She later described her work as coming from God, and an old black bust of Jesus stood on her desk with the words Pro Humanitate inscribed upon it. As she continued writing during the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, these later works, including 4 more symphonies, became even more inventive and sonically uncompromising than her earlier works. For example, her composition number 2, subtitled Dies Irae, was scored for the unusual instrumentation of 8 double basses, piano, and a cube she built out of fiberboard. Perhaps unwittingly, in evoking the ineffable, Ustvolskaya gave voice to both earthly pain and dissatisfaction with repression of any kind. According to one observer, her works were received as half forbidden fruit, half mystical revelation. Despite Galina's complete lack of interest in socializing and cultivating support for herself and her work, her music eventually found its way to a broad public. It was received with considerable interest in Europe during the Glasnost era in the 1980s and after the fall of the Soviet Union in the 1990s. Dutch conductor and pianist Reinbert de Leeuw became a champion of her music, performing it throughout Europe and recording several of her works, including the Second Symphony, her most important and challenging creation. Ustvolskaya felt strongly about which works would be included in her final catalogue, culling it down to only 25 pieces and destroying all compositions she considered to be weak. Many of the works she eliminated were her Soviet-style commissions, 3 of which she retitled, obscuring their programmatic content. Ustvolskaya, a truly unique voice in Russian and indeed Western music, died in 2006. Her estate is managed by Konstantin Begrenin, her devoted husband, assistant, and manager of 43 years. Mr. Begrenin stated about his wife,
Важно знать, что Уствольская быстро писала много музыки для симфонического оркестра. В то же время она писала сочинения, которые вынашивала десятилетиями и никому их не показывала до определенного ей самой времени. Эти сочинения – плод многолетних поисков. Уствольская их выстрадала. Если сочинения для симфонического оркестра были замешаны на таланте автора, то последующие на страданиях его. Первым из этих сочинений была обнародована соната для скрипки и рояля. Она исполнялась в 1962 году на Варшавской осени. Тогда Европа впервые услышала это имя – Уствольская. Свои новые сочинения автор назвала «Моя музыка, только моя». Еще учась в консерватории, Уствольская искала пути сочинительства по принципу не как писать, а о чем писать. И после многолетних поисков и раздумий она нашла свой путь. Я считаю, что это нужно знать всем, кто соприкасается с музыкой Галины Уствольской.